Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make some homemade ravioli using the sourdough discard pasta we made this morning. And then we are going to bake up our two sourdough loaves, our pepperoni one and our traditional, and we'll make our homemade sauce. So let's start by getting our bread scored and in their Dutch ovens. I've had them sitting in the oven for the last hour, preheating to 500 degrees. And this is our mozzarella and pepperoni loaf with some Italian seasoning and oregano. And we are going to just do a big kind of cross score. Snagged all the way across. And then just do a couple little side scores for decoration. The only score that really matters is your expansion score, which is your deep score that you do. The other ones are just the bells and whistles to make it pretty. But that expansion score allows the bread to expand out. Now, my Dutch ovens are very, very hot, so always use an oven mitt. I'm going to pop our first loaf in. Beautiful. And let's put our lid on because I like to seal that moisture in right away. And now we are going to do our traditional loaf, which I'm going to do. I've done it in a loaf versus a bowl. So it's not round. It's got a oblong. And these have been in my fridge since last night. I put them in about 11 o'clock last night after I did the laminating process so that they're nice and cold. I really find that overnight, about 20 hours really does great. We're going to do a nice long, big expansion score across here. And then we'll just do our pretty little kind of wheat leaf design. There we go. And then I'll take off my lid. We're going to put them in here with the lids on. And then these are going to go in the oven at 500 for 20 minutes. Then we're going to take the lids off and we're going to cook them at 450 for 20 minutes. And so the first 500 is to kind of cook it in, keeps the steam, the natural moisture in the Dutch oven. And then when you take it off, the second part is to get that golden kind of crust that keeps, nice and chewy. But I love the lid on because it keeps your dough and just nice and chewy versus hard and crunchy. Oh, there we go. Now I'm going to set my timer for 20 minutes so I do not forget to take that lid off. Put these over here and we are going to start prepping our meat for our filling for the ravioli. So I'm going to get my pan. I'm using my big sauce pot because we're going to cook up the meat in here. Some of it will be left over for the sauce, but then that will make our sauce in here and then we'll put the ravioli in here. So I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in, and then we're going to use a pound of Italian sausage and about 1.5 pounds of ground beef. And I'm going to just use my spatula and we're going to just kind of smash everything up. And then we're just going to cook it all the way through. And then what we're going to do is we'll take some of this meat out and we'll put it in our food processor with some mozzarella and some homemade ricotta cheese. And that's going to be the filling of our ravioli. So it will be a, kind of Italian sausage and beef and cheese filling. Okay. I just like to smash this up because I don't want to have any super huge chunks. Spread that out. And then we're going to give it some seasonings right now. So we're going to put about a tablespoon of garlic salt in here. So might be a little less. It'll probably be closer to 2 teaspoons when I look at it. There we go, because we got to season up all that meat. And then we're going to put in about 2 tablespoons of Italian seasonings. There's 1, and there's 2. And then I'm going to mix this up into our meat because we want it to have a nice, good flavor. You want it well seasoned because we are going to be mixing it with some ricotta and mozzarella. Therefore, we want it to have a bit more seasoning than if we were to eat it straight up. There we go. And I'm using mild Italian sausage versus hot Italian sausage because I am not, our family, we're kind of spice wimps. We don't really care for it to be too spicy. Okay. While this meat is cooking up, I am going to start chopping up our onion for our sauce and our basil. So we're using 1 really big yellow onion. So this is kind of closer to 2 yellow onions or 2 medium small yellow onions. We cut off both ends. We're just going to peel this whole top layer off. That way you don't have to work to get all the chewy parts off. Get some of these scraps out. And then I'm going to do a fairly small dice on it, bigger than a mince, but a small dice on it because I do want my onions to kind of disappear in the sauce. But you want that nice flavor. So I'm doing very thin strips across. And then we're going to just go through here so you can see it's a really, really fine dice. And once I do this one, I'm going to actually go over it again because I do want them to really disappear into the sauce so that they really are just a flavor enhancer versus a texture enhancer. And that is going to be like crucial for our homemade marinara sauce for our ravioli tonight because you really want the ravioli to be the star and the filling to the star. So you don't want like your sauce to detract too much from your delicious ravioli. There we go. Before I go and do a mince over that one, I'm going to just scrape up our ground beef and Italian sausage that we have cooking with Italian seasonings and garlic salt. And this is going to be used both in our sauce as well in our filling. So it's much more than you could possibly use for your filling, but I like to have a nice meaty sauce on there because I think it just complements well. Sometimes I do make meatballs with ravioli, but I just find that ravioli and meatballs, they're not as easily eaten together. So I find a nice meaty ragu is nice for it. So I'm just going to chop up some of these bigger chunks with my spatula. Okay. And then we're going to go over our onions again. So we have a nice little dice here. And just making sure we get any bigger chunks for it. We're going to caramelize them up, and that will help also soften them. I'll bring my little onion pile over here. And we've got some fresh basil. And I'm going to pull the leaves off of this. You don't want the stalks of it. Those will just be chewy. They don't give you any extra flavor. So we just want to pull all of those off. And if you don't have fresh basil, you could always substitute for dried basil. You'll probably want around 1.5 teaspoons of dried basil. But I find that fresh basil just is a much nicer flavors in it. And you don't need too terribly much. I'm taking about 5 or 6 stalks and peeling off the kind of the tops of the leaves with them. There we go. And this is going to add a nice kind of fresh flavor to our marinara sauce. But you want to make sure you mince it up nice and fine. Before I do that, we're going to go through this again. I'm going to break up any of these big chunks. And once it's all the way cooked through, that's when we're going to start making our filling for our ravioli with it. But you want to make sure it's cooked through because we're going to puree it in our food processor, which will kind of make it a meaty paste. But it will be perfect with the cheese for our ravioli filling. There we go. Turn down my heat just a smidge. And now we're going to mince up our herbs here. I'm going to go back and forth over them. There we go. And I'll mince them up in just a second too, a little bit more, because I feel like our meat is pretty much here. Perfect. So I'm going to turn my skillet off right now. And I've got my food processor over here. Bring this right over here for right now. And I'm going to use a slotted spoon. And we're going to fill up our food processor with some of our meat filling. And you want to use the slotted spoon because you want any of that grease to kind of fall out. That juices from the meat will be great for our marinara sauce, but we don't want it in our filling. There we go. And you want a lot of meat because it's going to be primarily meat, like double the meat to cheese. So we've got our meat for our thing. I'll slide that right over there. Now, earlier today, I made some homemade ricotta. You know, I just cooked milk on the stove, added a little bit of vinegar, and then we heated it and strained it to make our ricotta. And the ricotta will give you this nice, creamy, delicious kind of texture to it. And then we're going to put in some mozzarella. So that was about 1/2 cup of ricotta. And you can use store-bought. I use it all the time, but I was out and my kids really wanted ravioli. We're going to put in about 1.5 cups of mozzarella cheese. So we'll have a little bit left over because this bag's about 2 cups and we had some from the other one. I recommend you can use fresh mozzarella, or if you're going to do it, get a high quality mozzarella that doesn't have a caking agent on it. I love Tillamook. Theirs is always really nice. The caking agent can just kind of change your texture a little bit. And now we're going to put our thing on and we're just going to pulse it back and forth. And you can see the ricotta is falling down and the cheese is falling down, which is making it a slightly lighter colored paste. Perfect. And the reason I like to pulse it in the beginning is so that it has a chance to fall down and not all become like pasty. And now I'm just going to take my knife my spoon, and we're just going to mix it up, and then I'll do one more pulsing through. But this is going to give you that nice, delicious kind of meaty cheese filling for our ravioli. Perfect. So here you can see the cheese even melting in it. that is going to be perfect for the ravioli. So I'm going to just take this off, clear this space out. So when we're working with some stuff in a little bit, we have the space. Okay, let's get our sauce going. So we have a little
question. This is your kid's favorite meal?
Yes, they absolutely love ravioli. And I think I can't remember the first time I made it. It was several years ago. And I made it and everybody instantly loved it. Even my husband loves it. Like, so this is one of the few meals that every kid really, really, really likes. So my son, I normally always make it for him on his birthday. And then my husband asked for it, and their birthdays are like 2 weeks apart from each other. So it's more of a labor intensive meal, although I've gotten it down to a science, so it goes a lot faster. But the first time I made ravioli, it took me like 4 hours. Now I've made it once you're familiar doing it, you learn a little tricks, it gets a little bit faster. I did it like it was just chaos the first time I did it. And it's not that it's hard. It's just, you have to just know, okay, do this part now versus like breaking it up and taking the little steps. So we're going to saute up our onions in that meat things. And we're going to add in some garlic. There we go. Apparently I must have screwed it on pretty tight. You want a nice healthy serving of garlic because it's going to be in our marinara sauce. So we're putting about a tablespoon of garlic in, because you want that garlicky taste.
So what are the sides with it?
We are going to have sourdough bread. And so we made 2 types of pizza sourdough. They're baking up and the traditional. And then we're just going to have some fresh fruit with it, since this one has a nice marinara sauce in it. But sometimes I do make a salad with it. But today I was just like, we did a lot of cooking today. My daughter's got hurt at her soccer game last night. Her knee's like bothering her. So then I was just like, you know what? We're just going to pull out of the tournament this weekend because I don't want to risk her injuring it anymore. And so we had a lot of freedom today. So I was like, we made a brunch, we made a lunch, and I'm like, ravioli it is. There we go. But a lot of times I make this really good salad with it. It's called, if you've ever eaten at Maggiano's, I think it's a chain, but we have one here in Nashville, and they have this delicious salad that has bacon, red onions, a homemade dressing, gorgonzola cheese, and I love that. And I typically make my little copycat version of that with this dinner because I feel like got to have a nice Italian salad with delicious ravioli.
You got a question? They saw you eat for a minute at lunch. Is their knee doing any better?
It was, but then I think the Motrin kind of went off. So it's like she says, what is the main part is like when she's taking steps and bending it. So I'm hoping it's just like jumper's knee and just she needs a little, TLC and some rest. But if it's still bothering her by Monday, I will definitely make an appointment. One of my friends is a PT, so I'm going to send her a message and ask her if there's anything we can do in the meanwhile. Because this, of course, happens to be TCAP testing starting Monday, and they really don't like you to miss during TCAP. So we've got to kind of work around the school schedule. I am mincing up my basil really, really finely here, as you guys can tell. So we're going to have about, I want to say maybe 2 tablespoons of fresh basil that we are going to add into our marinara sauce. Okay. Just going to give a stir around, make sure I get any of this nice kind of drippings off the pot, and we're going to add it in. Perfect. Get all that off we should just be done with that. I'm going to need my knife for cutting my ravioli in a little bit, so we'll keep that. I'm going to give this a good stir, and we did already season this meat with garlic salt and Italian seasoning during our first step. And let's see, I've got my pot on. I want it to start boiling. Let's put a little salt in the water. Since ravioli is, the noodles are a star, so you do want to salt them a little bit. So I'm going to put about, I want to say 2 teaspoons of salt in there. And this will just help season up our noodles. Now, I'm not going to be using any of the starchy pasta liquid for this dish, but if I was, you'd want to make sure you definitely had it seasoned up. Okay, we've got our garlic. Now I'm going to add in some tomato paste. Now, normally, a lot of times I would just use store-bought spaghetti sauce, like I love Rao's, but this is, my kids wanted it, and I didn't have the straight up stuff, so we're just making our own marinara, which is similar. So we're using about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. I get it all in there. This is what is nice. I always say I never meal plan. It's always kind of input on my children and how I'm feeling for the day. But I always have staple ingredients on my children and how I'm feeling for the day. But I always have staple ingredients in my house so that I can make pretty much anything, you know, until we get down to the end where I'm like, I need to do a major restock, which we're kind of getting there. Because I do like to buy a bunch of bulk. I had earlier this year, after we did our like big kitchen remodel, I realized our pantry was just not going to cut it for our family of 7 that really feeds like close to 11 every day. So we had my honey, my husband, I had him build me a new pantry and make it nice and big. We're adding in about, this is 3 cans of diced tomatoes that I pureed up for our sauce. So it's would be about 3 cans of tomato sauce. And this is going to be the base of our marinara sauce. And then I'm going to add in just 1 can of diced tomatoes because I do like a couple tomato chunks in there. And we're going to let this simmer. And you want the juices and all for it. And then I'm going to turn it down to really low because if anybody knows, when you try to boil or simmer or tomato sauce, it bubbles everywhere. So I'm going to keep it nice and low and slow. And I think we're done with this. I'm going to get a little spoon to taste right here because I want to make sure I don't need to add anything else to our sauce while it simmers, because you want to add it sooner rather than later because you want your spices to marry. And that happens through, you know, time and heat.
You have a question? Do you grow any of your own tomatoes?
In the summer, I do. I do grow a lot, and then they make it till about July, and we go on this big long vacation, and Tennessee is very, very hot, and they all die because they don't have enough water. And it always seems to be a big drought when we go on vacation. So I put in a little bit more garlic salt and just a touch more Italian seasoning, about a half a teaspoon more. There we go. And now we're just going to let this simmer. And while this is simmering, I'm going to clear up my area over here so that we can roll out our ravioli. So earlier today, we made our pasta dough. We used eggs, our discard, about 2 cups of discard, and flour, not 2 cups, 200 grams of discard. Let's take the lid off first, which is perfect timing, and then we can roll this all out. So they have been cooking, our 2 sourdough loaves have been cooking in the oven for the last 20 minutes at 500. Push OK. Now, let's take out our first. We're removing the lids, and then we're going to cook them for 20 minutes at 450. But do you see our beautiful expansion score popped and our pretty little leaf design? And always I'm like, let's hope for the same result on our pizza loaf. Very nice. You can see the expansion score has really popped up. This was our pepperoni and mozzarella, which will actually go great with our ravioli. And now we're going to take the temperature and we're going to bring it down to 450 because I don't like my loaves getting too dark because I love the chewy crust of sourdough. And I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes so I don't forget. But I don't like it when it gets too hard to chew through. And that happens, I think, when you overcook it or cook it to a really deep crust. So I like to do more minimal.
You have a question. Do you ever can any of the vegetables from your garden?
I have not done canning. And I have friends who've done canning, and I've just never taken that adventure yet. But I'm always like, I should try. But we're such a large family, and I don't have, we don't have a huge plot of land. We're on like a 1/3 acre. And so, I only have one part of my backyard that gets good sun because we have these cool, huge, we have a sugar or a silver leaf maple, and it just like makes it all shady. And I can tell that tree's probably 100, 200 years old. It has this huge trunk, but it shades most of our backyard. So we don't have a lot of growing area, and what we grow, we pretty much eat.
That's our sugar maple.
Yeah. No, it's the
silver maples in the farm.
Ah, okay. But they are, I love them, and so I will never cut them down, and because they shade our whole backyard, which makes it actually like doable in the Tennessee heat. Okay, we are going to make these in a couple balls so that we can go through our pasta thing. So this is a pasta attachment. I'm just doing the sheet one for our KitchenAid, and it works with all KitchenAid. I know I have this like limited edition professional one that I got like 20 years ago. I got it in 2006. I got it for my Christmas present of 2006. So it's been with me forever, but this attachment works with any of them. Make sure you coat. Flour is your friend when you're making this because you don't want things to stick. So I'm making sure I put a nice layer on here. I'm coating this up nicely. And because we did lots of kneading on this, we should have a nice elastic dough. And what I'm going to do is we're going to spread this through. And I kind of roll it out to a level 4 on here for my pasta dough. And what I do is I'm going to make each batch of ravioli at a time versus putting all of the noodles out because I don't like my noodles to dry up. But this will make a nice long. So I'm on a level 2 now. And it goes all the way to an 8, which is great for like angel hair pasta or anything. But for ravioli, I do like it to have a thicker noodle, similar with lasagna, because you want it to hold a little bit better. So now we're going to a 3, but you can see how long it's going to get. So even though I have 4 balls of dough here, I'm going to make several ravioli. And I will tell you, my ravioli isn't the most beautiful because I do it quick, but it tastes delicious. And that's all that matters. I'm not the one who's going to get the special little score to make the pretty little leaves on it. You know how you have that ruffled edges? Now we're going to number 4. And this is the fun part. Let's see if I can get up. There we go. And the trick is you don't want to let it hang. If you let it hang, then like if cling over the edge, your ravioli or your pasta dough will get stuck and tear. So you want to kind of help it gently through.
And what number do you stop at?
I stop at number 4. And it gives you, I feel like that's the one they recommend for fettuccine, lasagna, and ravioli, and it works great every time. So we're gonna put our first sheet across here.
And how many ravioli do you normally get?
I've never counted it up, but when I'm making ravioli, it typically feeds 10 people plus extra. So it makes a lot of ravioli. I've never actually counted it up. And I will say mine have various sizes. Okay. We got on there. I just want to make sure I have some good flour underneath so that it doesn't stick. Perfect. Same here. We're going to give this a nice little stir. And then before I do my filling of my ravioli, what we want to do is I want to get my egg wash mixture. So I'm just going to crack 1 egg in a bowl, add a little bit of water. We'll mix it up. And that is going to be essentially the glue that holds your noodles together. You just need about a tablespoon of water in there. You don't need much. Pop it. And then so this is like your cooking glue. And a little goes a long way. So you don't need much egg wash for it. But, okay. Now for the ravioli making part. Slide this out of the way. And so here's our delicious kind of meaty, cheesy mix. And what I start is it's simple little balls across here. And perfect. So you just do, I'm using, this is kind of like a big, spoon for like your, how in your utensils you have a big spoon and a small spoon. This is the bigger one of the spoons. I think they call it like the soup spoon. And I just kind of use the tip of it. This is about a tablespoon of our meat and cheese mixture. And then this one will cut. And then what we're going to do is you take your egg wash right here and you're just going to brush it right along there. And then I'm going to brush one right here because I'm going to cut and fold that way since it has side one. And then you're going to just take your knife. And see, I've gotten better in time because I've done it like an assembly line. And that's how it goes things. So then you just fold it over and then you pinch your pasta dough around it. So you just pinch it together and it will be nice and stuck.
You have a question, when you cook them, about how long does it take?
They take about 3 minutes to cook. Fresh pasta cooks up so fast. So what you do is the clue is you pop them in, they originally sink and then they float up to the top when they're about done. I always cook them for about a minute after they all float up. And they are just like a perfect tender thing. But that's the bonus of homemade pasta is it cooks super fast. And we're just going to pinch all the way around. You want to make sure you pinch it well.
You have 2 questions. What type of countertops do you have? And is the filling pre-cooked?
The countertops we have, this is a quartz. And yeah, I just picked out the design because I really liked it. And then the filling, we cooked the meat. We cooked Italian sausage and ground beef up first. And then we put them in the food processor with mozzarella and ricotta. And then we also use some Italian seasoning and garlic salt in it. So yes, it is pre-cooked. So you could eat the filling. It's delicious. I've eaten it before. So you don't have to worry about cooking everything in there. And the meat was hot, so the cheese is already partially melted. So it does go pretty fast with the cooking process. So here we've got our first batch of ravioli. I'm going to give our sauce a nice stir. Perfect. You want to just make sure you scrape any of this. And then what I like to do, let me get this out. I get a big baking sheet. And you want to take your flour and you want to dust it, cover it with it, because we're going to be putting our ravioli on here to rest. And if you don't dust it with flour, the ravioli will start to stick. So that's why I say flour is your best friend, because if they stick, then they're more likely to tear. So we made 8 in that first set. And these are big raviolis, so they're not tiny. Our noodle kind of got stuck together here, but we're just going to gently pull it apart. It won't make too much of a difference. Okay, and now we're going to go through. We're going to do the same thing where we do our little tablespoon. And I typically a lot of times I have leftover pasta, which then what I'll do is I can literally make it into lasagna sheets, or I can cut it up into regular pasta. But you can dry it out, or you can keep it in the fridge. Just make sure you really coat it with flour so the noodles don't stick together. But this is, and I try to make enough, but you never know. Sometimes you make more than enough or not. But I'm going to say on my calculation for the ravioli amount, this is probably going to make maybe 50, 60 raviolis.
Do your parents love the ravioli?
Oh, yes. When I say this is everybody's favorite meal. My mom always requests this for her birthday too. Okay, now we're just gonna, we want to do the slices first. So just and you want a sharp knife for this. You're not pushing hard, but you want it to kind of just cut through quickly. And I said a butter knife just doesn't work. And then we're gonna go through, and then you just pinch around. So yes, I was like, I don't take the time. They get these little roller cutters that you then roll around. Not going to happen. Too much time. I want it to taste good. It doesn't have to look like the king's meal. To me.
Some comments that people want for their birthday.
Yes, it is. It's just everyone's favorite. But you know what? There's something about ravioli. It's just absolutely delicious. There we go. But it's one of those things where I always say it takes forever, but it doesn't take as long as it used to. The first time I did it, I remember I told my parents, I said, we're going to be eat at this time. They came over and it was like an hour and a half later. It just took so long. And then eventually I got to the point where I'm like, okay, you guys eat what I've already cooked up. But it just goes nice. And, that's why I said, the first time I did it, I rolled out all the noodles, which then I had like sheets of noodles all over. And then they dried out, like they got stuck. So they didn't want to stick together well when I was working with them. So then they kept cracking and breaking. And so now I've learned to just roll out each sheet at a time. And it works well for you. Plus, if you realize you have enough, then you can just say, I'm stopping.
Remember last time you made it, your parents absconded with the rest of the ravioli.
Oh, yes. I made this last time. And, my husband, and, Torn, who's his favorite meal, they were eating it. And they had gave it a bowl. And I told my stepdad, I was like, okay, your food's ready. You can come over and get it. And I'm like packaging it up in there. And, my husband was like, I think I'm going to have some more. And then Torn was like, I'm going to have some more. And my stepdad goes, oh, I think you guys have had enough. And then he was like, I better get out of here quick. And he ran off with the bowl of ravioli before they could have seconds. And I think that was for Torn's birthday too. They stole the ravioli from him. Okay. Let's pinch these around. I will say I used to make this with just regular pasta dough, but I started making this sourdough pasta dough not too long ago with discard. And this one got stuck. So that one's a bum, but we have plenty to go. You want to make sure it got stuck because I didn't flour it enough. But I love this new pasta dough because it is so like elasticy, which makes it really great to work with. Okay, let's give this a nice stir. You just want to constantly stir your marinara so none of it sticks to the bottom of the pot and burns, but it's going to be delicious. Okay, let's roll out our next one. I always remember to bring it back to one because if you don't, your pasta dough will shred and then you just got to re-roll it. So we're going to go through.
What fruit?
We're going to have cantaloupe with tonight's dinner. So I have my pineapple isn't quite ready yet. And I don't think I can force my kids to eat any more bananas. I've been trying to get through my giant bundles of bananas that I accidentally bought. And they're all like, we're done. I'm like, don't you guys want smoothies? So I made everybody a blueberry mango banana smoothie today. And then I tried to give them another banana at snack time. And they're like, we're done. No more bananas. So I think I'm thinking we're going to have a lot of banana bread, banana donuts, banana muffins, banana everything. But the nice thing is before your bananas go completely bad, if you cut them up and you can store them in the freezer and use them for smoothies. I find frozen bananas make the best smoothies.
You have a question? Do you think you'll get around to making a written recipe for ravioli?
I will do that. I can get that as my next one because I will say this is everyone's favorite. I can get that one up quickly. But you know, you can always rewatch the video. I guess you'd have to watch two parts because we made the dough this morning, or was it at lunchtime? And then or everything here. So until I have then, I guess you could watch it on when we have it uploaded. But I will try. I'll make that in my next thing. I have a whole list of recipes that I have to go through. It's just sometimes it's hard with recipes because if it's baking, it's a little bit easier because it's an exact type of thing. But when it's cooking, it's just whatever moves me. Like, ooh, that looks good. And that's why I say when I'm looking at it, I can really guesstimate and tell you what amount of spices are in. But sometimes it's after the fact, I'm like, oh, I got to go watch the video and see exactly how I did it. Because I don't really follow recipes. I just kind of, wing it. But I think when you've been cooking long enough, it's much easier to wing it. Just because you've gotten used to it and you kind of know how things work together. Okay, we've got this. When you are placing your ball of meat, you want to leave a little bit on the bottom. You don't want them smack dab in the middle. You see how they're not smack dab in the middle? You have a bigger section here because this is how you're going to seal them together. And if you don't leave yourself enough room, then you end up ripping your pasta dough while you're trying to seal it. There we go. And we're going to cut through just like this. Again, nice sharp knife. Make sure your countertop is well floured. If you I have a quartz, which means I can cut, on the countertop and not worry about it. But if you have like a butcher block or something like that and you don't want cut marks on it, just make your noodles smaller and just cut on a cutting board, a well floured cutting board.
You have a question? Do you have a YouTube channel?
I do have one. It's on the link on our page is where you can access it. That's where we upload all of our videos. So that's the easiest way to kind of see our catalog of all of our cooking and access it. There we go. Pinch it around. See, we've already got a nice big tray. So they come out pretty fast, which is, I guess, this is a good thing to do while making sourdough because sourdough always needs about 40 minutes to cook.
I'm eating that whole thing.
Yeah, you are. I will say if I don't tell my parents that I'm making ravioli, then there are no leftovers. If I have told them I'm making ravioli, then I make sure that everybody gets some. I will sit there and I'm like, you've already had like 3 plates full. You've already had like 20 ravioli. But it's funny how if people like it, how they tend to overeat.
You got a question? What's in the filling?
The filling is, we started by sauteing up 1 pound of mild Italian sausage with 1.5 pounds of ground beef. We put some Italian seasoning and garlic salt in there, and then we put it in the food processor with ricotta and mozzarella. So it's like a meat and cheese filling with Italian spices. And this is one of my favorite. Now I've made a couple other one, like I've done a braised short rib ravioli and a sausage and butternut squash filling one. But this is everyone's favorite, just the good old, Italian, meat and cheese ravioli. Pinch that around and pinch it. And I guess I make mine pretty big. You can make them smaller, if you want to. I find bigger means less work. And that means they can just eat fewer. Let's give this a good stir. Perfect.
You got a question about how long to cook it again?
It takes about 3 or so minutes. Now, if you put a whole bunch in it, it might take a little bit longer because it's going to bring down the temperature of your water. But they sink first and then they rise to the top. So that's kind of my indication. And you'll feel, you can also take them out and try it. You want to eat them when the dough is soft. So they start out stiff and then they soften up. But I will say the discard dough works a lot better for that. Okay, we're going to put this through and then we're going to take a quick pause because our sourdough bread's about to come out. So we remember we have it on our first setting. Our sour, this is the golden show. Okay. Let me just clear this area because I don't want to knock anything over. So we've got our first loaf. This is our traditional loaf, and it is gorgeous. So I'm going to put it right here. I know you're beeping at me. And then we've got our second loaf, which is our pepperoni and mozzarella loaf with some oregano and Italian seasonings. Okay, I like to, as soon as I get done making them, I like to slide them out because I want them to stop cooking. And just slide this right over here. So we have, this is our pepperoni and mozzarella loaf with Italian herbs and some oregano in it. And this is our traditional loaf. And the reason why I like to take it off right away is look at that perfect crust on the bottom. You don't want it to get burnt. And these Dutch ovens stay hot for a really long time, so they'll continue to cook them. So I'm gonna just put them over here to cool so they're out of our way. And we'll make one more batch of the things and then we'll start cooking up for them. And then I'll make some more. Okay, so I did the first one through. And the nice thing with sourdough, before you cut into it, you want it to let it sit for about 10 minutes so that it has a chance to steam out so it's not gummy. So I should be able to cut into that loaf for you guys so you guys can see the crumb on it.
You have a question? What's your husband's favorite sourdough loaf you make?
His favorite sourdough loaf was, I believe it was black pepper and Parmesan cheese, or what was cheese? Was it black? Black pepper and Gruyere cheese, and I believe oregano, fresh oregano. That was his favorite loaf. Now I have a feeling this pepperoni loaf is going to be his new favorite because this guy loves pepperoni. So I'm certain that this one is going to be his favorite one. And it looked like it turns out well. Okay, we're gonna really coat this with some flour. So you want to be able to have your noodle roll around. And then we're gonna go through. My ends that are kind of funky shaped, I need to put it there. And then what I'll do is I'll cut the strip farther up so that I can fold it. Instead of folding it down, I'm going to fold it across over the other way. That way I don't have to just square off the ends. You can square off the ends where you cut them, but to me that just wastes homemade pasta dough and takes more work. And looks like we can get another. There we go. And then we are going to brush it with our egg wash again. So I'm going to brush between these because remember I'm going to fold them down. And then you just want to do the top because if you put too much egg wash on it, then it's too slippery and it won't stick together. So just on the top, that way you have a dry side and it will act like glue. And I like to leave a little bit of room around the sides too. You don't want to cut those too super close. Otherwise, again, you will end up tearing your pasta. And then you're just going to pinch it around And if you really want them to be beautiful, they have these little things that you can then go around.
Yeah, I commented they like your Easter Thompson in the window.
Oh yes, I have them for every season. You know, I know everyone calls them gnomes here, but where my mom is from in Sweden, they call them tomten. So they're like little people who watch, they have magical powers who watch over your house and bring you luck throughout the year. So it started off if your animals got out on your farm, they would make sure they came back. Or if you left a light on, they would make sure you turn it off. And then we have a tradition at Christmas. We set out a bowl of Christmas porridge for them, which is really like rice pudding. And you leave it, and you got to leave a big glob of butter on them. Otherwise, the Tomtons won't be happy. And Tomtons live forever too. So it's a crazy thing, but I do try to make sure that like it was a part of my childhood, and we have them for all of our things, and they're dressed up. But it's funny because everyone calls them gnomes, and gnomes weren't big here until I want to say like 15, 20 years ago, because you never really saw them growing up. You know, people had a few garden gnomes, but now I feel like they're in like every holiday you see the decor. Okay, we're going to put these last ones up, and then we're going to throw these in our pot of water. So I have it nice and boiling with some salt in there. And what you want to do is I have it boiling well on a medium, but when I put the ravioli in, I'm going to turn it up to high, because what happens when you put all this pasta in, it's going to lower the temperature of the water, and I want to keep a nice rolling boil. So that's kind of like my trick is I make sure it's boiling at medium so that when it goes into high, I have room to increase it. Okay, let's bring our first sheet over. As you can see, we have several ravioli here. And I'm just going to drop them in. And I like to hand drop them in versus trying to like dump the whole tray in, because you know the dough can be a little tender, and if you haven't floured enough, it will stick. And so you want to be mindful of that. And now I can see I'm going to turn my heat up to high because it has already stopped boiling. And I can get about a full sheet in here. When I fill up the second sheet, then you got to do a second batch of it. But these you don't have to worry about being too crowded. And I just want to push them all down under the water. We're going to let those boil up. And again, they need about 3 to 4 minutes. And you just want to just keep constantly kind of pushing some under the water, because what they'll do is you'll have some rise to the top, but you want them all to. Let's check on our sauce here. I think we're about towards the end. I'm going to add, I like kind of like a vodka sauce. So we're going to add just a little bit of cream to it. About, I want to say maybe a third a cup, because I like that it kind of cuts down on a little bit of the acidity of it. And it just kind of marries the flavors together well. There we go. But you always want to wait until the very end to add your cream, because it can curdle. Let's pop these under. There we go. And once I have a full boil, then I'll know they're ready. So we got to bring it up. But while we're doing that, we can pop in and make our last kind of little batches here. And then we'll cut open our sourdough. So I've got my flour out. Remember, you want to really coat it in here. And we made this this morning, and this was our discard. So it used 500 grams of bread flour, or no, all-purpose flour. You don't have to use bread flour for this. And then 200 grams of active starter or discard. I guess mine was, I fed it afterwards. So you want the discard. And then 4 eggs. And I use extra large eggs because that's what I always buy. And it turns out like great. It starts off as a stiff dough, but as you can see now, it's really supple, which is what you want. But that's why it's so important in the beginning, because you don't want stiff pasta. You want nice velvety, soft pasta. You've got to really knead it. The kneading is what gives you the nice elasticity of it, and for it. And I will say the sourdough helps as well with making it a nice supple pasta. Put this guy through. And I think I'm only going to have enough to make one more sheet with our meat here. I always say I have extra left over, and a lot of times I make noodles. We'll have extra noodles, or I'll save it for chicken noodle soup or lasagna. Let's go. Oh, we've got a nice boil going on over here. Perfect. I'm just going to pop them around and switch them. And what I do, I don't drain my ravioli. I use a little small strainer and I just scoop it out. That way I can keep using this water, and so you don't have to throw it out. So we're going to go in here and we're just going to take a couple at a time. And I'm going to turn off my sauce now. And then I put my ravioli straight into the sauce. That way it can get that nice flavor for it, and it helps prevent the ravioli from sticking together. You just have to be careful when you are stirring your ravioli that you are using gentle things, because otherwise you can kind of tear into it. Look. You see how many we've made so far? And I have a few more pillows in here. And then I'm just going to use a nice, I'll pull this out. I got all of those right there. But a nice silicone spatula works great for this, because you're just going to take this and you're just going to really try to be careful and slide it around, bring up this delicious sauce, and kind of make sure you coat every little ravioli with it. And that helps prevent the noodles from sticking together. But again, just be gentle because they are delicate.
Really good question. What were the first recipes you started to make at 13?
Not very good ones. I made a lot of, it was like tacos. It was like basic 90s, 2000s food. So tacos, spaghetti, soup, like chicken noodle soup, really basic meals. I remember it was like crock pot meals. And then it wasn't until like later on, like a couple years later, that I really started to get more adventurous with it. And that's when I started to incorporate cooler stuff in it. But here, let's cut through. We can do the crumb on our loaves here, and then we'll serve up our ravioli. But yes, it was my cook when I was 13 does not compare to the cook now. So we've had them sitting. They're still a little bit hot, but we've got, oh, that one had a big bubble in it. That's okay. Still good, still even. I probably just didn't laminate that one as much. And okay, that one was perfect. Same dough, funny. But this is our pepperoni and mozzarella loaf. And then this was our sourdough one. It has a little bit of things, but still good overall. But we'll have these with our dinner tonight. So let's plate up. And let me get a, where do I want to?
You have a question? What does laminate mean?
That is when you take the sourdough after you've done the kind of bulk proof on the counter, you stretch it out into a big rectangle, and then you shape it. So you kind of fold it into each other and roll it out. But if you don't stretch it all the way out, then it will, you can leave pockets where there's air bubbles and they get bigger and bigger. So we've got our delicious ravioli, and of course we're gonna have, and this was with our Italian sausage and ground beef. We'll have it with some fresh Parmesan or shaved Parmesan, and we're gonna put a nice slice of our pepperoni sourdough bread with it, because this, guys, is where it is at. So that's dinner tonight. Our homemade ravioli using our discard pasta dough with Italian sausage, ground beef, Italian herbs, mozzarella, fresh ricotta, and then our homemade sourdough bread with mozzarella and pepperoni. So guys, well, thank you so much for joining us here today. I like to show you what we're cooking for our family, and hopefully like you guys can learn to make it as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to comment or message us with any questions or cooking questions you have. Thanks again.